Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's lecture, which is one of my favorite chapters in the textbook, Perceptions. I know that this little virtual island background seems a little weird today, especially with us entering the fall season and things starting to get a little chilly. But I think it's perfect because we're moving really, really close to our lost essays assignment. What I want you to think about is everything up until this point of the class has been preparing you for these essays. Next week, even this week, if you wanted to, you are going to be responsible for watching the first 2 episodes of Lost. It's the pilot episode broken up into 2 parts. They're about 45 minutes each. For those of you that have seen the show, you'll recognize it. For those of you that haven't seen the show, I'm about to start you on a whirlwind adventure because Lost, in my opinion, is one of the greatest TV shows of all time. And the reason why we're watching Lost is because everything that we've been talking about so far in this class is really salient in those first 2 episodes. And I want you to write about them. But since Lost takes place on a deserted island in the middle of the tropic with a jungle in the background, I thought this virtual background with the soothing waves would be a good background for our lecture today. And rather than doing a PowerPoint lecture, I'm going to kind of just leave this space open and I'm going to, put the words over here. So really what you should be doing is reading the textbook first, then watching this video lecture, and then using the video lecture and the text to help you with the assignment later on. All right, so a couple of things that I want to talk about. I'm going to breeze through this chapter a little bit because I thought that this was one of the more fun ones to read and a little bit more of one of the eye-openers. So I'm going to mention a few things that I want to make sure that I explain so that you have enough detail to talk about them in your essays if you choose. So really, we're going to break down this chapter into 3 major sections. The first section is the process of perceptions. The second section are going to be the fundamental forces that are on place of our interpersonal communication that kind of shape the perceptions that we make. And the final thing that I want to talk about are the different types of attributions that we make when we perceive others. But first, when we talk about perceptions, what we really mean is the input that we take in to make conclusions based off of what we see, what we hear, what we think, what we feel. So it's all this data that we take in that allow us to kind of make judgments. I want you to think about this for a second. You walk into a party and you don't really know anyone. And you kind of scan the room and you see the guy in hemp clothes playing his guitar. You look over and you see a girl that looks like Regina George leaning in really closely to a guy that looks like Aaron Samuels. You see a group of fraternity brothers taking shots off of really good-looking girls' belly buttons. You're going to start to make judgments about who you think these people are as people. And we do that through our perceptions, or really the decisions that we make about each other based off of what we see and what we know to be true. So when we talk about the perception process, our mind works in 3 different ways that then shape the conclusions that we make and the actions that we take. And the first step of the perception process is the selection process. And this is the process in which our mind and body chooses certain stimuli to attend to and to focus on. So really, if you're in class, you might be focused on me. You're choosing to listen to me, to watch me, to take in my nonverbals, to see my body movement, to look at what I'm writing on the board. That's the selection that you have. Maybe there's a loud ticking sound in the back of the room, and you might choose to listen to that. So our minds select a certain and specific stimuli to focus on. And then because we've chosen to select that, we then go into the organization phase. So once we select a message or a stimuli, we go into the organization phase. And there's a couple of different ways that we organize the things that we take in during the selection process. First, we look at the physical construct of what we're taking in. And this is where we emphasize appearance. What do things look like? How is someone dressed? What is their body type? Those kinds of things. Then we look at the role construct. So once we look at how someone's dressed or like their physical appearance, we emphasize social or professional positions. So if I'm dressed professionally and I'm giving a lecture in class, and you know that I'm your teacher, you're using my professional dress and my role, my profession, as a way to kind of interpret my credibility or if what I'm saying is true, those kinds of things. Then we go into the interaction construct, and this is where we emphasize behaviors. What am I doing? Am I underlining certain words when I write them on the board? Does that tell you that this is important? Am I sitting there in the front of the class like this? Maybe that shows you that I'm mad. Am I jumping up and down with excitement because we get to talk about loss? So what do I look like? What is my role? What am I doing? What are my behaviors? And then finally, we go into the physiological construct. And this is where we emphasize the thoughts and the feelings. So if I'm giving you guys a lecture and I'm really angry and upset and I'm like, you need to know this, blah, 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 that's a physiological construct that you're using to go, oh, my teacher is mad and this is important and I really need to learn what he's telling me because we didn't learn it last week. So you've selected to focus on me. You've interpreted my role, my characteristics, my interactions, my physiological nature, and then now we make some interpretations or conclusions based off of the messages that we've selected and the way that we've organized the data that we've took. So our interpretation is figuring out what all of that means to you. And it usually involves closeness and relationship building. So if you and I were close and you were able to kind of pick up on my demeanors and, evaluate my nonverbal skills, you might come to that conclusion that I'm upset and we need to learn this very quickly. If we're not that close, or maybe this is the first time that you've been in my class, maybe you need a couple more social cues to pick on. So I want you to think about that. The next time you go into a party and you kind of examine everyone around the room, you're choosing to select that specific person or that specific song or that specific bottle of liquor that's on the counter. You're organizing the data that you're taking in to then make a conclusion about who you think these people are and what you think they're doing and what you think they're like outside of a party based off of what they're doing in front of you. So that's really perceptions in a nutshell, just that perception process, how we select messages, how we organize those messages, and how we interpret those messages to conclude a decision based off of what we're perceiving or taking in around us. The next section of this chapter talks about all of the fundamental forces that are at play during this decision-making process that's really focused on our perception. And these are things like stereotypes and generalizations, right? We use stereotypes and generalizations about a group of people or a category of people, and these can have powerful influences on how we perceive them. If one of the girls at the party is in a cheerleader outfit, and we haven't had really good experiences with cheerleaders, maybe our cousin is a cheerleader and she's ditzy and said like all of the time, maybe we just kind of assume that she's stupid and unknowledgeable because that's a stereotype of cheerleaders. If we see a guy at the gym with one of those low-cut shirts that kind of show off all of his muscles, we might think that he's a tool because that's what society tells us to think about people who dress that way. So sometimes we use our perceptions to conclude stereotypes or generalizations. We really don't know these people. So we're just taking in stimuli and we're using what we've been taught in society to make interpretations or conclusions on them. We also use the primacy and recency effect. The primacy effect is really focused on our first impressions. That first impressions are critical. If we're on a blind date or we've matched on Tinder or whatever, and you're like 15 minutes late to that first date, that's going to have a huge impact about how I perceive you as a person and how I perceive our relationship to take off. If you're getting off on the bad foot already, then chances are I'm probably going to make negative perceptions about who you are as a person because you pissed me off in those first 15 minutes. But if you're early and you're super cute and you give me flowers and you pay for dinner, because that happened in my first impression, I might think that you're a super awesome person and you're a nice human being and you're caring and professional and well educated and you make a lot of money because you paid for my dinner. So our primacy effect is like our first impressions really kind of form the perceptions that we make over on throughout the relationship. It sets the tone for future interactions. Whereas the recency effect is the most recent impression we have of someone is sometimes more powerful than our first impression. So if you're 15 minutes late on this date and everything goes crazy, and then we go on a second date and that second date was wonderful, I might overlook that first impression because of this second chance or this new behavior that you're establishing. Maybe you learn something new about someone and it changes the way that you think about them, even though that's not how you used to think about them. So the primacy is our first impressions, and that tends to set the tone for how we perceive someone later on. And then the recency is our more recent interactions with that person. Our perceptions can change as we get to know people more. We also have the positivity and the negativity biases at play with our perceptions. And this is when we tend to pay more attention to someone's positive traits or someone's negative traits. So if you're a Rachel Green, that's a Ross, Friends, not a Ross. Ross is who Rachel ends up with. That's a Friends reference. You know, Rachel's a very pretty girl. She works in fashion. You know, I might like you more just because you're pretty. I might want to be around Rachel more because she's stunning to look at and she's well informed in fashion. Whereas Chandler is kind of annoying and goofy, and maybe that's not a characteristic or a trait that I value. So I don't really want to be around Chandler. Do I want to be around someone who's pretty and can teach me how to dress? Do I want to be around someone who cracks dad jokes all the time and is an accountant? I mean, sometimes we think like that. So we have our own biases that shape the perceptions that we make about people. Also, we can tend to be pretty egocentric. This means where we lack the ability to see another person's perspective. So I might think that like my mindset and my occupation and my personality is like the best, right? I'm a Sagittarius, and Sagittariuses tend to want to be the most important person in the room, and they want everybody to look at them all of the time. So sometimes my perceptions are a little egocentric, where if you don't look like me and act like me and sound like me, I might not like you. Whereas we shouldn't really be perceiving people that way, but sometimes we do. So we've got stereotypes, we've got biases at play, we've got egocentrism at play. These are all fundamental forces, you know, things that shape how we perceive others. The last thing that I want to talk about today are our attributions. And attributions are the explanations that we have for observed behavior. It's the why, right? So it's the why you don't like someone or the why you really like someone. If you think about our attributes, you know, we attribute summer with heat because it tends to be hot in the summer. We might attribute winter with depression because typically we're a lot more sad when it's gloomy and we can't go outside and there's no sun. So we attribute certain things to other things based off of what we know, just like how we attribute conclusions or feelings with other people based off of the perceptions that we've taken in on them, right? So there's this wonderful term called a locus, and this is where the cause of the behavior is located internally or externally, and we might not necessarily be able to help it, all right? I might not be athletic because I'm paralyzed from the waist down and I can't get up and walk. I might not be able to look you in the eye because I'm somewhere on the spectrum and eye contact is something that I struggle with. So we have internal things that are going on with us, and we have external things that are going on with us that might shape how someone perceives us, but are completely out of our control, right? If I'm not wearing my glasses and I'm looking at you, I'm probably going to be looking at you like this. And you might think that I think that you're stupid or dumb or weird, but it's really, I just can't see you without my glasses. So I'm squinting. So that would be like an external attribute for me. Like I can't see, so I'm going like this, but you might assume that I'm judging you because I'm squinting. So that's an attribution that you make about me, a perception that you make about me that I can't help because it's something that I can't control internally about me. We also have stability. This means how stable or unstable someone's behavior is. You know, those people that fly off the handle. If you're easily offended or easily, angry, people are going to have perceptions about that, and they're going to make judgments about who you are as a person based off of the stability of your behavior. We also have controllability. This is the degree to which people have control over their actions. You have people that are really in tune with their emotions and can really read the room really well and know when to pull back their behaviors. Other people can't. We talked about that last time. It's the high context and low context, where you're able to read the room and adapt as needed or not able to adapt as needed. Sometimes we make perceptions based off of how well someone can adapt to their environment. We also have other attributions like the self-serving bias, and this is when we tend to attribute our success to internal causes and our failures to external causes. This is something that I do all of the time, right? If I'm really, really good at my job and moving up the ladder and I become CEO in 5 months, it's because I'm dedicated and I'm hardworking and I'm smart and I'm determined. But if I get fired, it's because my boss hates me and people at my job just don't understand me. So it's when we see good things happen to us and we go, oh, all of these good things are happening to me because I'm good and I'm awesome. But then when we fail, it's not our fault. I failed because this person doesn't like me, or they made me start at 8 o'clock in the morning all the time and I'm not a morning person. So the self-serving bias is our successes are our fault, but our failures are other people's faults. I think we do that a lot, and we shouldn't, but it's a constant struggle, right? We also have the fundamental attribution error, and this is when we attribute people's behaviors to their internal rather than their external causes. So this is when, if someone is sad all of the time or they're constantly negative all the time, maybe we are just assuming that it's because they're depressed or they have anxiety or they are introverted and they don't like people. Maybe we don't even think about how they just lost their job, their pet died, they're in a military family, so they're constantly moving around. There could be other external forces at play that are creating these behaviors in these people, but we are choosing to associate those behaviors based on something that we think is internal rather than external. So really, the common thread or the theme of this lesson today is our assumptions, right? Our perceptions are the conclusions that we make about people, about scenarios, about situations. Really, these are assumptions. It's just that first, well, they're wearing really tight clothes, so it looks like they're trying too hard, right? We don't really know who these people are. We're just making assumptions based off of what we've learned and the stimuli that we're taking in. The final thing that I want to talk about regarding attributions are over attributions. And this is when we single out one or two characteristics of a person and then attribute everything they do based on those characteristics. And I think we do this quite often too. It's Thanksgiving is coming up in a few months, and we might have that aunt or uncle or that cousin who's always got something nasty to say about the president or about politics or something. So we just conclude that that's how they're like for everything in their life. Oh, they hate the liberals or they hate the conservatives. So because they hate the liberals, they hate theater and they hate movies and they hate art. And if they're conservatives, they hate these things or that things, those kinds of things. And that's not necessarily always the case. So sometimes we over attribute other people's characteristics and we make assumptions based on who we think they are because they show us this constant stimuli, and that might just be one aspect of their, self. I like to think of the self as crystallized. If you are holding a crystal, it's jagged and there's different shapes to it, right? A diamond is cut in a unique way. There's angles and there's points and there's squares and there's solid pieces and curved pieces. And if you hold that jewel or that crystal or that diamond into a light and you turn it, the light is going to hit that crystal at a different wavelength, and then it's going to create a different shadow or shine a unique shimmer on that wall. And as you turn that crystal or that diamond, the light is gonna hit you differently and the crystal's gonna pop in a different way. People are just crystals constantly being turned in the light. And who I am at home might not be who I am at work. And that might not be who I am with my friends. And that might not be who I am on the CTA, on the train, on the red line, underground, at the subway. I mean, we are different depending on who we're around and what our environment is, what we ate for breakfast, what we watched on TV before we left the house. All of these things change our emotions. They change our attitudes. They affect our state of mind. And we put that out into the world, and then people around us will make judgment calls based off of what we do, what we say, how we say it, what we're wearing, how we're standing, those kinds of things. So we attribute certain behaviors to certain characteristics. We focus on certain stimuli to then organize those behaviors in our minds to make conclusions. And there are other outside forces that kind of impede on our judgment and unconsciously shape the thoughts and the conclusions that we make about others. So there's quite a lot of pages in the chapter that I want you to read for today, but that pretty much summarizes everything up. I hope you enjoy this chapter. I think it's very eye-opening, like I said before. I hope the little soothing beach background was fun for you, and I cannot wait to show you the first 2 episodes of Lost. So you've got an assignment for this week where I'm asking you to save 8 people from a sinking cruise ship. You can see a deserted island in the distance, and you think these 8 people are your best chance to survive and make it off the island. You've already made those decisions. So that was the first thing that you did, was you selected the 8 people that you want to save. Now for your kind of reflection, that's your go reaction. So your go reaction is not reacting to something that you learned this week. It's selecting the 8 people that you want to save and why you chose to save them. Your assignment for this week, another assignment, is a reflection. I want you to go to that go reaction and watch it back. And now I want you to answer the questions that I have in this little test about why you chose to save the people that you chose. Was there over-attribution at play? Was there the fundamental attribution error at play? Were you placing blame on someone's internal characteristics rather than their external characteristics, or vice versa? So why now? Now, why did you choose the people that you choose? And I bet you're going to see some overlap from this lecture and the text to inform those answers. So think about why you picked who you picked. And I'm very, 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 very excited to see your answers. All right, that's all I have for you. Enjoy your week.